CTV News, does the CTV News division turn a profit for Bell Canada?
No, it does not. We lose $40 million a year in news.
Oh man, he just said the quiet part out loud.
Like my friend Anita Krishna in Canada, she worked for a global news or a big news network. She started to ask just regular questions. She's like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? We're a news organization. Isn't that what we do as a news organization? And she got fired for that, of course.
Crazy.
But you heard correctly. CTV News Vice President Richard Gray, during a parliamentary committee meeting, says that the broadcaster is losing $40 million a year and that viewership is declining year after year. You know, what can we say? You reap what you sow. In a previous video, I covered the editing, the bad non-mistake of an editing job that they did on Pierre Poilievre. And although it may have seemed like a very small thing when they were doing it at the time, it's just so wrong. And it could never happen unless you were told to do that. So lo and behold, there's a committee meeting going on, and somebody texted me that clip that I played from the Canadian Independent. So thank you for that, and shout out to you guys. And now I'm going to go on to the meeting itself, onto the website. I haven't seen this, so I'm going to watch it with you. I worked late today and I came home late, so I'm just finding out about all this. But you know, why not? Let's watch it together. Make my comments as we go. Here we go. But before we get started, he's talking about that bad edit job and the news that it created. And they say they let people go because of it. Let's hear what he has to say. You know, the edit job where they took out the part where calling for a carbon tax election and made it sound like Poilievre was talking about dental care. I did a video on it.
We've got Mr. Richard Gray, Vice President of CTV News.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. I am pleased to be here to contribute to your study on misinformation and disinformation, which are important issues facing Canadians.
No kidding.
As Canada's most watched news source, CTV News is keenly attuned to the challenges of a changing information ecosystem. In a rapidly evolving world, it is more important than ever that Canadians have access to fair and balanced news coverage they can trust. I want to recognize the tireless work of CTV News journalists and staff who go above and beyond every day
Oh my God.
to uphold our mandate with the highest standards of honesty, transparency, and independence.
You are not doing
It is
that, and
not
everyone
always
knows
easy work,
it.
but it is important work and it deserves to be recognized. For over 60 years, CTV News has kept Canadians informed of the stories that matter to them. In recent years, this has included a once-in-a-generation pandemic, elections at home.
Oh, brother. You know, you took like 4 years to ruin what you guys built up in 60 years. And same with Global. You took since 2020 to ruin what Global has built up for 50 years. Trust gone.
Thanks to the hard work of its journalists and
Yeah.
staff.
I'm going to shuttle ahead a bit.
The experience that Mr. Poilievre had related about those Canadians. And then, of course, we have the most recent example of the blatant disinformation spread by your network. This disinformation that was perpetrated on Canadians was spread on across your platforms, where instead of the message that Mr. Poilievre had given, which is what we hear from millions of Canadians, and that's the need for a carbon tax election when Canadians can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves, you altered it to you altered that quote from Mr. Poilievre into one that reflected talking points from Justin Trudeau's Prime Minister's office. So we wouldn't know about that most recent case if you weren't called out by a Conservative staffer. And you said you're sorry, but we know that you're sorry that you're only sorry that you got caught. Isn't that right?
I disagree with your characterization.
They always say that.
So are you sorry?
We've apologized twice for a mistake that occurred.
Oh dear, not a mistake, man.
Back and reviewed all of your coverage of Mr. Poilievre and his discussions about the Trudeau Liberals' carbon tax on everything that they plan to, of course, quadruple, raising the price of gas to 60 cents a liter. That's seen 1 in 4 Canadians not.
Richard is struggling to defend himself because he knows there's no defense. He knows you just don't make a mistake like that because you're deliberately cutting and splicing.
Because I can assure you, sir, that going forward, we know that we now need to do this not just for ourselves, but for Canadians, because certainly the trust has been broken.
So thank you. I disagree with the characterization that we are engaged in a campaign of disinformation with respect to Canadians. It's our job to present all sides of public policy issues in a balanced, accurate, and fair way so Canadians can make informed decisions on them. That's what we do consistently on a daily basis. This particular issue that happened on September the 22nd,
Sir,
was
so
a very rare and unique occurrence.
Well, I'd
was
be
a
interested
mistake.
to know
We
how
apologize
you
for it.
I would be interested to know how you verified that it was rare if you didn't go back and review all of the other instances of coverage. Like I said,
Good question from Michael Barrett. And you know, it's not a mistake. It's not a once in a lifetime thing. They have confirmed that they fired one reporter and one editor. But like I said in a previous video, it's not just a reporter and an editor, because on national newscasts, everything is transcribed by the producer. The producer knows what clips, the executive producer knows what clips, and the piece that they're talking about aired on a national weekend broadcast. So these two people that were fired were just like the fall guys. They didn't act alone. It's impossible. And newsrooms don't work like that. This guy, Richard Gray, would know that. I know that. Anybody that's been in the business knows that. Not
I'm
much
gonna go
to
Ms.
say.
Shanahan
So
now for 6 minutes.
obvious.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the witness for appearing before us today. Mr. Gray, I'd like to ask you, what steps do CTV News journalists and newsroom managers typically take to ensure that aired reports meet the current journalistic and ethical standards? And I'm looking for a rather fulsome response, because we want to understand. I don't know if anyone here has worked in a newsroom. I certainly have not. We want to understand what the process is, kind of from the beginning, you know, to
Oh,
the
okay.
aired
This should be
product.
interesting.
So I think the first and most important component part of my answer to your question is that we have very rigorous and steadfast policies that spell out the expectations as to how our journalism is conducted. In addition to these policies, we adhere to the RTDNA Canada and Canadian Association of Broadcasters respective.
I would say that these policies are not very clear, and these policies, whatever policies there are on paper, what are you talking about? Nobody's even aware of any policies. When I was bringing up stuff over at Global, they're like, "Are you aware of the journalistic principles policy?" What policy? I never even saw it before in my life. They emailed it to me on a Friday because they thought I violated something when I didn't. I was just seeking the truth, and I was supposed to read this big document by the Monday morning when they were grilling me. And this guy is talking about policy. That question was about how does the newsroom work, is what she's asking you. You know, he's talking this freaking bureaucratic gibberish. I'll tell you how it works. Well, I'll just quickly tell you, they produce a show. They know what the stories are going to be of the day, what they're chasing. They have a morning meeting. They know what reporters they have on staff. They assign reporters certain stories. The reporter goes out, interviews people, news gathers, looks up information, tries to present both sides. They get their pieces, get their clips, rush back to the editing room to cut their piece together. That's how it goes in a nutshell. But they're in contact with the producer the whole way, letting them know how the story is going. And the producer is also producing elements to put in their story. So that's in a nutshell how it goes.
Codes of ethics.
Oh, Lordy, what's he talking about?
What occurs in the newsroom on a daily basis is that all of our team members are expected to follow those policies to the absolute letter.
Nobody's even thinking about the policies.
And
they don't even know what they
with
are.
respect to particular news stories, they are all vetted by a senior member of the team prior to their going to air.
Right.
To ensure that they are factually correct.
He's right about
and that there are no legal issues with respect to the content.
Yes, sometimes some stories have to be lawyered. What
happened in this case on September the 22nd was that those policies and codes of ethics were violated by two individuals at CTV National News. In one case, a reporter altered a script after it had been approved by the producer significantly changing the meaning and the intent of a particular clip to better suit the requirements of the story they were attempting to tell. In the second case, an editor spliced fragments of 2 segments of a statement together, creating a clip that hadn't actually been spoken in order to cover a technical issue with the original recording.
Oh, so you're trying to tell me the producer vetted the story and said this is what we're going with, and the reporter went behind the producer's back and then changed the story? That's the first thing he said. They would never do that. They just you would have no incentive to do that, because if you go against your producer, it's just a headache and a half. The producer is in charge. If they say if you've completed the story and vetted it, you don't go back and change it. You would have no incentive to go back on what you two have produced together and change it. And the second part that he's going to say is that there were technical audio problems when that clip, like I told you, the DeGero or whatever, they used a DeGero, but lots of stations do. They used a clip and they said the audio and the video was no good, or they had to splice it together to save it. But you can also get these clips from a pool feed. So if your audio is mangled for some reason, you can grab CPAC's audio. You can get your sister station. Some other station might have the complete audio also, because you're a network. You're CTV. You have access to the full clip, because the full clip is there. It lives. It exists. We heard it. So I think both these answers are bull.
In my 33 years working in television news, I cannot recall anything similar to this ever happening before.
Well, what are the chances
So
that this happens?
How does it happen? How do the newsroom managers, I take it that would be the senior person that would be responsible for making sure that this didn't happen. So there's questions there as to where were they? How do they ensure that they are broadcasting accurately and that it reflects the facts without any tampering? Like, do you have some kind of a technical way of checking that? And of course, we're living in an era today where, you know, deep fakes and video alteration and so on is almost child's play.
That's got nothing to do with how we cut in a newsroom.
We have an elaborate process of verifying all facts. It's multi-layered. But even with that check and balance, it would have been impossible in this case to catch this error, because as I said a few moments ago, what happened here is that the script that was produced and approved by the producer was later altered.
Why would they do that?
2 ways, by
You
the
want to get
reporter
fired?
and by the editor. Again, this is something I have never seen and have no experience dealing
How do we
with
know
in,
that's
in my
true?
33 years in television news.
I doubt this is true. I think they
A
just
long
have
time now, Mr. Gray, the Conservative Party leader has been attacking mainstream media and journalists with the intention to mislead and to make Canadians believe that news networks that they have trusted before are no longer trustworthy. Can you comment on the dangers that this presents to the state of Canada's information ecosystem and our democracy?
Yeah, you're getting shitty information. You're getting biased information.
I mean, it's critically
Because of the
important
government
that there
buyout.
be absolute trust in all of our institutions.
Bailout or whatever.
Both the media and our government. And there has been a general erosion in that trust over the last number of years.
No shit.
I think
that is due to public statements by political leaders such as Pierre Poilievre.
Oh, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think it is the result of a number of things, probably the biggest one being that there has been a shift in our society where there is a more prevailing attitude that if you're not with us, you're against us.
No.
Oh, that's very interesting.
That's not it.
How then are
You are
these
against
risks
us.
then exasperated when a situation such as the one with CTV News, as discussed earlier, happens? In other words, this, if you're not with us, you're against us kind of attitude.
I think that the key point to be made here, and I have tried to do this in
Let him answer,
in my
then I'll move
response to
on a bit.
questions up to this point is to say this: we made a mistake. our standards were being met. It was determined that they weren't. We, as a result of that, made the decision that the 2 employees involved would no longer be part of CTV News or Bell Media.
Okay.
And then we apologized again.
Thank you.
I'm going to get to the part with Andrew Scheer pretty soon. This is pretty easy to check because in their news system, whether they use iNews at CTV or Avid or whatever they use, if the producer vetted a story and it was cut, the intro would be written. The content of the item of the package, sound on tape, the reporter piece would also be saved in an archive, because as you, just like with anything, when you save a draft of anything, it's in your computer. So you can look at prior versions and they have timestamps on them. So if there's a prior version in there and it was cut properly and it's what the producer has vetted and approved of, then it would exist in there. If you go back and cut, that's also easy to find out. If you recut it, if they say, oh, this reporter, went back and recut it after it had been vetted. Super easy to check and super easy to provide the proof. So you can get the CTV producer who says, no, I checked it. You can check the archives. It's in the archives. It's so easy to prove. Just prove it. And you should do an interview saying, hey, and show us the proof. I'm going to skip to the Andrew Scheer part.
I want to welcome Mr. Scheer to committee. Mr. Scheer, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, God. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I
You
just
said,
have
"Oh,
to go
God."
back to what you said. You said that the clip was altered. You showed Canadians something that never happened. And you're telling me now that there was no intent to misinform Canadians and that the reason for that altering of a clip was because it had to be cut down for time. So the words that were cut out were carbon tax election. Okay, now I just timed myself. That took about 1.2 seconds. So you're telling me that there was no intent to misinform Canadians and they had to cut this down for length, and that it would be understood that the quote from the Conservative leader was about a carbon tax election, even though you removed the words carbon tax election. Can you understand how we're having a very difficult time accepting that?
So I want to be clear.
Why do they always say that?
What I indicated was that was the explanation offered by the individual involved. That was not my explanation as
Do
to
you
what
accept
transpired.
that? Do you accept that? Or do you believe it was deliberately done to mislead Canadians?
I do not believe that it was deliberately done, but
Oh,
still,
come on.
So do you
there was a
accept
there was a violation of our editorial standards. So, these
do
2
you accept the
individuals are no longer
explanation?
part.
Do you accept the explanation that was given to you?
We have made a decision that due to the violation of our editorial standards, that these individuals are no longer part of CTV News.
So what do you believe the motive was?
It is not for me to determine what.
Of course it is. That's your job. You're the news
All right.
head.
CTV
News
News
VP.
is a division of Bell Canada. Is that correct?
It is.
Bell Canada makes about $2.3 billion in profit based on 2023 numbers. Is that about correct? Would you agree with that?
I'm not aware of how our company performs overall.
Well, I can confirm that that's true.
News.
I'm looking at it on your website. CTV News, does the CTV News division turn a profit for Bell Canada?
No, it does not. We lose $40 million a year in news.
Okay. Bell Canada makes a lot of money because it operates in a protected marketplace. Is that correct?
Again, my responsibilities are for managing the operations of CTV News.
So I don't need to know anything
I'm not an
else.
executive at Bell Canada.
Okay, well, I can tell you that it does. It makes an awful lot of money off the backs of consumers because of government policies. In fact, I have here that Bell Canada in the last year lobbied this government over 50 times. That's more than 4 meetings with government officials a month. That's more FaceTime with senior government levels than some Liberal MPs get. Is CTV News's viewership increasing or decreasing year over year? Would the viewership this year be higher or lower than last year?
There has been a consistent erosion in viewership in broadcast media in this country for a number of years. It's falling year over year.
I wonder
If
why.
you'd like
When you get caught putting things on the air that you then have to admit never actually happened, I can understand why viewership as well as trust would erode. I just want.
I can give you a couple of specific.
Sorry, I only have about a minute left, so I just want to make understand one thing. Does CTV News have a diversity target?
Our goal is to reflect Canada, and the current visible minority percentage in this country, according to the 2021 census, is 26%.
Do you have a target for diversity of political viewpoints at CTV News?
It's our job, as I said earlier, to present all sides of public policy issues in a balanced, accurate, and fair way.
That doesn't answer the question. Do you have a specific policy to ensure that the editorial direction, the journalists, and the producers at CTV News reflect Canadians' political spectrum?
It's not the job of journalists to reflect the Canadian political spectrum. It's our job
But you're doing it.
to present stories in an unbiased,
the Liberals.
balanced, accurate, and fair way.
No,
You are
you're
biased.
telling me you have no way of determining whether or not the producers, the editors, and the journalists all have the same liberal bias. You have no way to determine that.
Quick response, Mr. Gray, please.
Our team do not have a liberal bias.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. We're going to go to Mr. Fisher
Look at his
on
face.
Zoom.
Well, that's kind of satisfying to see someone on the hot seat. And he said it right there. There's a consistent erosion in viewership, and that is because of a lack of trust. They did confirm, as I might have said already, that they fired the reporter and the editor because there always has to be someone on the chopping block. When the Liberals invite a Nazi into the House of Commons, when Zelensky came to town, somebody's got to go on the chopping block, and that was Anthony Rota, right? So it's all his fault. There's always got to be a fall guy, and that's the way that they roll. And there's also no way that they would be chopping up any sentence because of time, right? Like, you can shorten a story if the show is getting heavy, because the producer has to get in at a certain time and get out at a certain time, right? So if the show starts at 6, the show will end at 6:29:50, 29 minutes and 50 seconds. And so it's a tightly timed show. So you wouldn't have a reporter in a half-hour newscast doing a 3-minute story. It's too long. You'd have a 2-minute lead, or 1:30, a minute 30. And if the story's going to 1:45, then fine. And you might have to cut it down or shave 10 seconds off or something like that. That's kind of how they do it, to nip and tuck, to make it all fit in. You don't cut a sentence. So no matter how you slice it, there's really nothing he could say there that would really sort of seal it in for CTV. He's actually just sealed their fate in the fact, and just shown that they didn't do the right thing. And throughout everything, they show bias. Look how much bias is being shown in BC right now. It's incredible. But anyway, I thought you'd get a little kick out of watching that. I always love watching these big wigs get roasted. Very interesting to hear they're losing that much money. News is losing that much money. It's sad. It's like a dying business. And we'll keep our eye on this story and see what develops next. Well, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a little like. If you've subscribed to my channel, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And turn on your post notifications so you get a little ping and a ding whenever I upload something. We'll keep our eye on this story, and I thank you so much for watching this video today.